Welcome to Perusing's Appraisers on Purpose podcast. Our podcast showcases inspiring appraisers and professionals from the industry who are leaders in their field. How did they get to where they are? What have they learned along the way? What can we learn from them? Your host is real estate investor, entrepreneur, and appraiser, Michael Hobbs.
Well, welcome back, and thanks again for joining us for another informative and exciting and insightful episode. We are thrilled to have a pretty well-known guest. Many of you may have had the privilege of hearing, seeing, or even spending time in person with Joshua Walitt. But Josh, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
We're grateful to have you. Always wonderful to hear different perspectives of peers who don't have necessarily the same path that others have taken through the industry. But as I mentioned so many times before, this podcast continues to grow organically because of your generosity, your thoughtfulness, and your actions. So please go ahead and not only like this podcast, and you're definitely going to like it a lot, but go ahead and like this on whatever platform you listen to it. But more importantly, add some of the comments. There'll be a lot of great food for thought as you come to know from Josh. But with that, Josh, we want to know, were you born this way, or how did you get into the valuation and appraisal profession?
I was not born into appraisal. I was not born into the valuation.
Good spirits. We love that. That is fantastic.
I know I wasn't, but I was going to college out here in Grand Junction, Colorado, western part of Colorado. I had moved out here after high school, got a scholarship, so it sort of made my decision, and was going to college, needed a job, and so I got a part-time job as a teller at a bank. I started at the drive-up. It just kind of advanced from there. I got into a supervisor position. Then I got to be a branch manager. And at that point, there was a time where I thought, I wonder if I can continue at this position for another 40 years or whatever it was going to be, listening to people talk to me about their overdraft fees and blaming me for their overdraft, just day in, day out. It is like how, it was a wonderful job. It was a wonderful company. It was a national company, very localized though, and it was a great group of folks. But I just wondered, how much is this what I want to do for the rest of my life? And so I called up a friend. His name is Chris, and he was an appraiser. And I said, tell me about this. Actually, I didn't even think of calling him. I was talking to my wife, and then she was talking to her friend, and then she said, hey, wait a second, I'm a realtor, and there are these people called appraisers, and Chris is an appraiser. Why doesn't he knows Chris. So I talked to Chris, and I shadowed him on one or two, and I thought, this is really interesting. I like this. I like this independence. I like this flexibility. I love this, like, every day you're accomplishing something, right? You're sort of checking something off your list every single day. So I liked that feeling of it. And so trained there at his office, became licensed and certified, and just started looking for different opportunities and looking for different connections and teaching myself other things. And so that's really how I got into it and how I got interested in speaking and connecting with people and more education, because I really like teaching myself. I thought, I could teach other people. So that's kind of a long answer to a short question there.
So you were on the path of being in banking. I mean, you were a successful banking professional, and you had made some steps in the direction of promotions and getting recognized. And you just decided that overdraft protection wasn't your thing.
It was not. But, I really thought, what do I want? And what, how can I sort of steer myself a little bit more? Because, we can only steer ourselves so much in life. I'm really a big believer in, yes, we make decisions. Yes, we're sort of in charge of our decisions. But in the end, life sort of takes us where it takes us. And I thought, with whatever amount of control I have, I want to exert that control to see what can I do. And so, once I was at Chris's firm, stayed there, and we got acquired by a larger company. I was able to do some consulting for them sort of on the side, still doing fee appraisals, and said, hey, we know you have this sort of this skill set over here for compliance and regulations. And so they put me to good use. And then after a number of years there, moving into their compliance manager position, I started my own firm. So now, I've got Walitt Solutions, and really just thought, a lot of these different skills that I've gathered over the years, I could bring these to other clients and really serve all sorts of different clients. And it's been very exciting. And again, just like what I liked early on, every day is different. Every single day is different. Yeah. We're just doing different things for different folks and helping them out. So
no, really appreciate that. So was there a particular day back in the bank where it was just a little bit like mind numbing that you're like, I can't do branch banking and overdraft protection, and I got to look somewhere else? I mean, because a lot of people, if for those that have had the privilege of going through a bank training program and being around banking, it has its ups and downs, as all industries do, but it can be a successful profession. I mean, it can be a career. And clearly that you saw that it wasn't for you, but a lot of times there's an incident or there's an event. Was there one of those for you?
There really wasn't. There was no final straw. There was nothing like that. I do remember, I wanted to advance. I also wanted to stay sort of where I was. This was well before, the time of Zoom. The best we had were conference calls when you put it on speakerphone in a conference room. Yes. That was pretty much what you did. Yes. And so if you were going to advance, you really had to move, and had a young family at the time. Mm-hmm. And, we still love living here. And so, the relocation wasn't an option. And so really needed to take a look and see, well, if I can't really go much further at this company, then what can I do? And so that's really that. But, there was no final straw. There was no incident. It's a wonderful company. I still have contacts there.
Sure.
And so, nothing happened that I needed to run away or anything like that.
There was no existential experience where one day you came in and you helped some maybe aging individual who had more zeros to the left of the decimal point than you knew existed in the world. And you're like, I'm doing something wrong here on this side of the desk. Like, it wasn't one of those experiences.
It was not anything like that. No.
Oh, man. So what was it like working with Chris? You mentioned you actually went out and spent a day in the life with Chris and found, this is kind of interesting. And it's right here in my local market. So you ended up joining Chris. Was it just the two of you all for a long period of time, or what was the learning like and what was the growth like?
It was a really good experience, a really good learning and growth experience, really. He had a firm with, I want to say, himself, and I think there were 3 other appraisers and an assistant. And then we actually had another appraiser across the hall. So there were a lot of good people to talk with in terms of their experience, in terms of the methods to follow, in terms of how to analyze. We also have had a really good, close relationship with the deputy assessor at the time, and he's actually now the assessor. And so I've continued that relationship with him, and so we really had a good pool of people to draw on, and there were another few trainees there at the time. And when I hear people talk about not training their competition, or it's really difficult to make trainees work, and it can be a challenge to make the model work, but I didn't experience anything in that way. I experienced a very positive model. I experienced just a really good training experience to where, I was free to, look for solutions, then bring it over and we'd walk through it and things like this. So that was sort of what I walked into, and really, really liked it. Really liked it.
That's fantastic. You mentioned assessing. Is that something you got some exposure to early on in your career?
I didn't much. I did talk with the assessor. I had to, different types of technology always intrigued me. And so I did at some point go over to the assessor's office, and we took a look at how they did site and land valuation through their mass appraisal modeling. That was very interesting to see the GIS systems and how they could actually take a look at, the frontage along water or busy road. And they had all sorts of characteristics. And so from that standpoint, it was really interesting. And I think that stuck with me because I've designed some things, some tools that people use for regression in individual appraisal,
Sure.
as well as you sort of build your own model. You see what fits the data, you see what fits those comps that are most like the subject, and you can actually help predict the subject as it's sort of almost a supplement to your sales comparison. That's my market machine that I've shown folks. And
Okay.
I think the reason I really got interested in that is because I was exposed to some of that as I would talk with other practitioners. And I think that's sort of where the future lies for valuation is technology, not necessarily regression. There's all sorts of technology out there. And I think, I think a lot of what's going on out in the valuation profession right now is struggling to merge the human with the machine, not in any weird science fiction way, but just saying, hey, look, how can the human analysis be supplemented with the technology piece? How can we become more our processes become more repeatable and be more consistent and things
very
like
much
that.
so.
Anyway,
well, thanks for sharing that. I was just going to ask, for people that don't know Grand Junction and they don't know where that is located in the great state of Colorado. So congratulations for being our first guest here on the podcast from Grand Junction. Tell us a little bit about that geography and topography, because it is rather unique. People think Denver, they might think Golden or Boulder, et cetera, but they may not know Colorado Springs. Like, there's a lot of the state people don't know. So tell us a little bit about Grand Junction and how that influenced your learning.
Sure. Yeah. So for those of you who aren't really familiar with Colorado, so you've got Denver in the eastern, sort of starting out the eastern plains there, Colorado Springs south of that. And then, so if you're in Denver and you go about 4 to 5 hours west, all the way over the Rocky Mountains, you hit Grand Junction, Colorado, almost at the Utah border. So we're in the desert area. And at the peak, I covered 4 counties. And so Grand Junction is the largest city in the western slope of Colorado. And it's a relatively small city. I mean, as cities go, sometimes I think of it as a big town, really. It's not, I don't almost consider it as a city, but so you've got a lot of small towns. You've got a lot of rural, remote areas. One of the areas I covered was 2.5 hours one way. And actually 2.5 hours isn't really that exact because there were 5 small, including tiny towns, like with 60 people in a few of them.
Oh my goodness.
It was 1,500 square miles, the whole market area. And so to say 2.5 hours to it is really not right, because it's like, where are you going there, right? But so that's like, that was the one extreme. And then, the other extreme is like downtown Grand Junction with some small city areas. So the experience I got from that training there, it sort of excludes some of that metropolitan appraisal, because I really haven't experienced that. But I've really experienced a lot of that good, bad, and ugly that you get with, small towns, rural, remote, small cities, all different property types. Sometimes those oddballs that you feel like, you pull up and you feel like turning around and going back and just crying because you don't want to do it. But, no, maybe not. But, so we had a variety to train on. When we talk about all these different training opportunities now, and people talk about, well, you might not have every type of property and this and that to train on. Well, it was pretty interesting because, I was able to train on modular, manufactured, condos, large acreage, custom, all sorts of, log cabins and, large acreage and, small site. And so we really got a really good training experience that, I like to think that if I did move and did appraisal in my new location, I'd have a really good base to gain my competency, because I would know a lot of the questions to ask. I wouldn't be competent immediately in the area, but I would know what questions to ask. So it's just sometimes you think it's kind of a curse if you're in a rural area, but really you learn some awesome skills.
I was just going to say, for people that are living in larger cities and they don't think of a town as 60 people, how do you go about doing an appraisal in a town of 60 people? Is there a sale once every 4 years or something? I mean, that is a bit foreign to a lot of people. I mean, these are those kind of inside the toolbox that people just don't get exposed to.
Yeah, it can be a challenge. I mean, you're pretty much setting your day aside, first of all, in terms of time. Like, don't schedule anything else that day. And you're probably leaving at 6 a.m. just to get someplace to do anything at any point. But, I had actually never been, one of the towns is called Bedrock. And I think that was one of the ones with like 60 or so. And I'd never actually been there. So I hadn't ever been to every town because there was never a sale or a refi that I got there.
Got it.
This 1,500 square mile, which I didn't do a whole lot in this area, by the way. I mean, because there's just not a whole lot going on. But you do have to look back in time. You don't look only in that small town. You look in the other 4 or 5 small towns as well. You do have to pairing sales. I know people often think of pairing sales as kind of something laughable, and it's not. You can set sales together and come to conclusions, and you just have to do it. And you have to lay out your logic and explain what you did. But you can come to some reasonable conclusions, and you can even use some analytical tools. If you take a look, there were probably maybe 40 sales in 2 years in that entire market area, and you can do some analytics. It's not maybe as reliable as if you're sitting in a metro area, but it still supported conclusions that you can apply some logic to. So I think of it as a challenge. And you think, oh my gosh, there's almost no sales. Well, that's a double-edged sword. There's almost no sales to choose from, but oh, golly gee, good for me. There's only so many sales to choose from. My comps are staring back at me. I just don't know it yet. They're there. I just have to choose which ones. And so you just don't have 100 to choose from.
I have to say, Josh, if I had to pick a highlighted phrase already from our time together, it would be golly gee, good for me. I can't imagine how that could just shine a light on our valuation peers' perspective of going from hopelessness to hopefulness. Because golly gee, good for me. There's just not much to work with. I just need to have a conclusive reason for why I'm going to end up where I end up. I love that.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it really sharpens your skills. You've got to be a good, not even just a good analyst. You've got to be a good writer because you have to convince someone to follow your story and have them come to that conclusion with you. And so it can be a good challenge. That's why I really love instructing on reporting, because I think sometimes that's actually the biggest piece. I think we might fall short on analytics in some cases, and I think we're catching up as a profession as a whole. And there's a lot of good people who are out there teaching it, because there's a lot in our profession who know what they're doing and really sharing a lot of the methods, the techniques that are really keeping us up to date. But it's the reporting that I really love. It's like when a person calls me up, they say, "Hey, Josh, I hear you help appraisers," and they're like, "Here, let me tell you about this." And they go into all this detail about what they did and why they did it and why they concluded. And they said, but my client is still not clear on it, and they're still wondering. And I said, well, what did you just tell me? Put
it in the report. I should tell the people what you did. What you write speaks for you in your absence. Right, that's the goal there.
Yes. Yeah. So I love that. And I think, I've been blessed to be in the area I am for professional reasons, but also just personal reasons. It's just a wonderful place. And which direction you look here, we have recreation. We've got ways to get outside. It's kind of a calmer lifestyle than maybe in some other areas. And so, I
appreciate that. You mentioned so much from kind of early on, you got exposure into a lot of different types of properties, different, not just the topography, but also the different socioeconomic levels. What's it like going from a sale in a small town of 60 to dealing with some of those like pristine premium and private residences that, are pretty much off the record and almost require you to sign an NDA just to even perform them?
Well, it is funny because, you could be at one day and the other the next day. So, one of the first lessons I learned when I partnered up with Chris, it was probably, I don't remember if it was when I shadowed or if I was, there officially at the firm, but I remember him telling me, we were going into, a house I would not want to live in. It was lower condition, lower quality. We could go into details of what I mean, but maybe that paints the picture. It was, the floors kind of sagged and it was older. It hadn't been taken care of. It had a lot of deferred maintenance needed. And I remember him turning to me and saying, "You're not here to figure out if you want to live here. You're here to figure out, is it habitable? And then what's it worth by looking at, comps and other methods." So that always stuck with me. And so, when you go into that, several $1 million houses, because around here, we're different than maybe major cities.
Well, even in your own state. I mean, you're in the Western front. You're not there at the Front Range in Boulder, for instance. The most expensive suburb of California before you get to Nashville. Exactly.
Right. But, you just, it is, you find yourself, just really looking at the characteristics and just being amazed at the variety of people. And then, what always struck me out in the field, what I always really enjoyed was talking with people. When they're home, it's great. You can learn a lot about the property, of course, but you also just learn about humans, and they're all, we'll say everyone's different, but really in the end, they're the same. It doesn't matter whether you're talking with a person at that old, small house with a lot of deferred maintenance, or whether you're at the mansion that's overlooking the entire cityscape up on the ridges or something like this. They're all just human beings, and you can talk with them. And that I really, just found really fun. I remember once, this was a very unusual experience, but someone attempted to bribe me, and this person who attempted to bribe me was probably a 9 or a 10-year-old. And he had been, I know it sounds bizarre, but I'm going somewhere with this story.
Yeah.
The point being, everyone's human. And, what happened was, apparently there were two owners, husband and wife, and this boy's mother was trying to buy out the father. There was some bad family situations, I could just tell, and the way she was telling me things about it. I obviously wasn't asking, but she was offering this information about her personal life. And so someone had coached this boy to give me this little wadded up bit of money, say, "Hey, we just want to make sure it works," because she wanted to get out of this bad situation, evidently, and it needed. And so I was like, so I said, "Oh no." So I kind of wandered over to where the mother was too, because I'd been looking at a bedroom or whatever when he came up to me. And so then I was like, "Oh no, I can't take that." So I made it kind of obvious to him and to the mother. But, you could be dealing with that exact situation.
It's true.
In any house. It didn't matter, what socioeconomic situation they were. You could just be dealing with a person who was hurt and who was just trying to get out of something or trying to get into something, and it wouldn't matter, whether it was the mansion or whether it was the 2-bedroom old house. But that always tickles me, that story. But it really, and that, of course I didn't take it, and I explained, in front of both of them, I can't do it. I made a note to the lender. I said, "No one needs to call anyone, I don't think, but I'm going on the record in case this turns into something," because I thought, oh gosh, personal matters are happening, and those I don't want to get dragged into that. But so I kind of,
you don't want to be accused of the piggy bank breaking in front of you, and you only took the paper currency out of it in exchange for making sure the appraisal report got done. You don't want to be that guy. That's
exactly. Right. I wanted to get ahead of the story, right? I wanted to be like, I'm telling it now so it doesn't look like I'm defending myself later. So, and nothing ever came. It was just this some misled adult told this.
Hey, you know what? We see it all the time, and that is, people have their own motivations, and then there's this little profession called real estate appraisal that's guided by USPAP. It's up there. It's there to uphold the public trust, but to do so in an independent and competent manner.
Right.
We're allowed to advocate. People forget that you're allowed to advocate for your value conclusion. That's pretty much it.
Right. Only for my work. Only for my work. Yeah. No advocate for other.
No, not at all. None whatsoever. Wow. That is something else. So how long did you stay in the field before your opportunities and your interest in learning continued to open up new doors for you?
I was out in the field. Gosh, how long was it? There was probably sort of a hybrid time when I was in the field a bit and I was doing other work as well. And even when I started my own consulting firm, Walitt Solutions, I still, at the very beginning, I was doing some appraisal. I'm not out in the field now. So, gosh, I don't know. Was it like something like 14, 15 years?
Like you were really in the field for a while. It wasn't just like, hey, I showed up one day, I worked for a year, and then boop, I was gone. Like you were in the field.
Right. It might have been more closer to 12 or 13, but something like that. But yeah, I enjoyed being in the field. I miss parts of it. But I really like what I'm doing now because I can kind of reach out to more people, kind of have a bigger influence. And I just love the different projects we work on with different appraisers or firms or, whichever.
When you were with Chris's firm, as you were, a budding appraiser superstar, were you starting to get exposure to the type of work that you do now? Or was it not until there was the acquisition and you were part of a larger firm would you start to see much more of the like risk analysis, policies, procedures? Because you've definitely gone in a particular direction that most people in the profession haven't. So for those of you who don't know, that's foreshadowing what will come in a little bit. But it's also helpful to understand, like, what were those steps that, Josh gets into the profession after being in banking and then progresses over a period of time of about a decade or so that then fully puts him to where he's at now. What were some of those in-between steps in years, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7?
I started, I guess, taking a look at different articles, commenting on articles, reaching out to different folks at different conferences and things, taking a look at even, Facebook appraiser groups and just kind of seeing, hey, who are some of the people I could reach out to for some good answers and things like that. So that it started getting my name out there a little bit. And I wasn't afraid to maybe be a guest, blogger or just write a guest article on someone's online, on their website or, get something into one of the magazines out there. And so I tried just, talking about what I know, right? Because at first, you can't go beyond what you know because that's a dangerous place. But, especially when HVCC came out, I found a lot of people were wondering what's going on? What does this mean? And so I really tried to study it. I asked a lot of questions of a lot of people. So then I could talk to people about what does this mean? And I started, at local real estate offices, at brokers and talking to different real estate agents. And then, I've noticed in life, sometimes folks reach out to you. Sometimes, right?
Yes.
Sometimes things come to you. But more commonly, it's you have to go after something. And so, we ask, I would love to do this and I want to do that. It's like, well, then you have to reach out. Because it's not, no one's going to read your mind. Okay. So what I did was I think there was like some sort of contest or something on like forums. And this is like back in 2012 or 13. I mean, this was a while ago, but it was something about it. And it was for a conference. And so they were like, they really liked your idea. So there were 2 winners of this. And so we wanted to get you registration to this conference. And so I started doing that. And then I made a suggestion. I said, hey, you know what? I really think you need someone to talk on such and such. And they said, well, then why doesn't that just be you at our next conference? And so then I spoke and I was absolutely petrified. I was on a panel with 3 other really great people who were well beyond my experience. I was very intimidated, but it was great. Really successful for me. People really tuned in and understood it. And so that's when I started really understanding, if we want a voice, we can have a voice, but it needs to come from you. You have to be the one to have the voice, and you have to go out and be trying to share good practices, be collecting good information, be disseminating true, accurate information. And so then I was able to get a few projects while I was doing appraisals, but I really couldn't focus on it. And so then I had a little bit more experience teaching when I became the compliance manager at the company that acquired us. And so then I had a little bit more freedom. So I could do a few projects. I could do some webinars. I could do some teaching. And then I really took a look and thought, well, what type of teaching do I want? So then I became a USPAP instructor, which is really handy in some of our litigation work where we take a look at working with an attorney and any respondents who have been accused of wrongdoing. So that's been real helpful. So I had to sit down at certain points in my career and say, okay, what do I want? What do I need to do to get there?
80% of all businesses fail within 5 years, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. With so many roles and responsibilities that must be managed and have nothing to do with appraisal reports, is it any surprise that it's hard to keep up? Much less having a sense of peace, stability, and profitability that comes from growing your business? Given all of this, you might already be thinking about exiting your business one day. Don't miss the limited opportunity to work with Michael, a real estate expert and professional coach. He has worked with more than 300 owners and entrepreneurs to find their highest and best use by solving problems that reach their most important goals. Compress decades of learning into days by working with Michael. Michael is famous in real estate and business coaching. With his help, you can accelerate your growth, increase your quality of life, and earn more money, all while ultimately doing less. Michael helps you not just grow your business, but also find new purpose in it and in your life. If you're ready to take control instead of being controlled, contact him on LinkedIn or email him at michaelh@paru.com.
It's been a little unusual of a journey because, almost like what you pointed out earlier with the banking, a lot of people would just stay at the bank and it just wasn't what I wanted. And so the way I've sort of crafted the direction that I go, sometimes it's a reaction to what life brings you because you can't control what life brings you. You can't control all the opportunities because they may be limited, but you can control the decisions you make in each of those situations. And so, you'd figure it's a left or a right. You choose right. Okay, now you're at another branch. You just make those decisions. So that's how I was able to sort of balance and really shift to a point where I said, you know what, I can do this consulting and help different firms, help different companies, help different lenders and appraisers. And I mean, we do work for regulators as well. And so we really try to take a look at where my theory now from this learning over these many years has been, if each participant, if each party is working correctly, it works.
Yeah.
Right. But if there's a broken link in the various professions and industries that are working together, let's say for mortgage lending or for other types of projects, then you have a problem. And that's what we try to do. We try to make sure everything's working correctly, everyone's optimally efficient and accurate or whatever their objective is. So
for people that don't know what the responsibility of a role called compliance manager is, what is a compliance manager?
Yeah, compliance manager can be a lot of different things. It can be a lot of different responsibilities. But if you think of it, first and foremost, if we're dealing with valuation, whether it's appraisals, whether it's evaluations, whether it's other similar types of work, we're looking at, valuation independence, or sometimes called appraiser independence, right? And so that's one of the first and foremost items that we take a look at. It's how does an appraiser operate if we're taking a look at the different regulations that relate. So obviously USPAP isn't a regulation, but we have state laws and state rules that move USPAP into the life of the appraiser and set it as essentially a regulation. And so, we take a look and say, okay, are the methods and techniques compliant? Are the reports compliant? We'll take a look at, even with AMCs, okay, how are the payments being made? Because again, if every participant in this chain is not working correctly, the system breaks. And that's what I've seen over so many years is when you're dealing with bad players, it's not a good situation for anybody involved, whether or not each party's, other parties are doing a good job. It doesn't matter because you have a problem situation. And so other types of issues would be, taking a look at various state laws. So not just the federal, taking a look at, I think I mentioned, payment timeframes, which are pretty black and white.
Sure.
Policies and procedures. So we'll take a look at policy and procedures for various entities, appraisal firms, AMCs, lenders. And, we look at training. How do you integrate a trainee? How do you integrate an analyst into your office in a compliant way?
Yes.
Because there's ways that you can do it, but it doesn't mean that you're meeting the regulations. And I think, I don't remember who it was, but someone has said, if you don't like the cost of compliance, you're not going to like the cost of non-compliance. Mm-hmm. And that's really what it comes down to. Is like, and it's not going to take you longer. People often think like, I'm going to have to do all these extra steps and I have to change well, maybe you do have to change what you're doing, but you can make it very efficient and make it fit into your just regular workflow. So you have this muscle memory, you have this habit, you have a workflow that is compliant and meeting all the needs of whether it's coming from state, federal clients.
Is that a type of role that you have to be a banker first to go into appraisal to become, or is it more just the benefit of maybe being with a little bit larger firm that has to have a few more roles and responsibilities? Because one of the wonderful pieces of feedback we hear from so many people listening to the podcast is, I didn't even know that position existed. I wouldn't even know to go and look for it. So, sharing your experience, Josh, helps pave the way for other people to consider what their future might hold in store.
I think working at the bank did give me the perspective of the user, right? And as working with loan officers there, I knew a little bit about appraisals, really nothing much until I moved into appraisal. But I think that perspective helped, right? Sort of walking in the shoes of another to figure out, this is what our users are looking for. But one of the challenges we have at my company is sometimes people say, well, now wait, tell me again, what is it you do? Because we do a variety of services for a variety of different types of clients. And it's, how you said, moving,
yes.
I didn't even know this role existed, or, said something like that. And really, this role doesn't exist in many other companies. And I would say, I'm not sure I've come across anyone who does exactly this. A few weeks ago, I did talk to someone who does something very similar, and it was a really good conversation we had, but it's very rare. And so, sometimes life brings you circumstances and you say, well, where's the opportunity? What can I do? What is missing? What other role could there be? And so what we do is we think of ourselves as a puzzle piece, and we are a different puzzle piece for different individuals or for different companies when it relates to valuation, compliance, regulations, processes. We've designed forms for private companies that are doing their own sort of appraisal service that, they sort of want it designed for their own private work, all the way to, working with a state regulatory agency and federal regulatory agencies, taking a look at standards and enforcement. So it's a very broad role.
So would you say that that opportunity to step into a role that was more, in this case, internal, as opposed to external being out in the field and visiting properties and concluding on value, as opposed to an internal role like compliance manager, was that more of a natural culmination of your personal curiosities and interest? Or was that just kind of like, Josh was the last one to touch his nose, so you got to come out of the field and go sit at a desk and push paper?
No, I think it was something suited for me that really interested me. And I voiced those interests in terms of what I could do for the firm. It actually came out of my experience in banking, actually, to go to your earlier point. I was sort of unofficially I was one of the ops people unofficially at the bank to come to in terms of, okay, well, what are we supposed to do with, the vault in this particular case? And how are we supposed to, document these logs and things? So I was this very technical minded person. And I if I didn't have an answer, I would get it. And then I made myself a resource for other people when that came up. And so I think that type of practice, I kind of held on to that. I kind of sort of knew in my mind, like, this is something that suits me. And so then when I was faced with that opportunity at the appraisal firm, I said, hey, I can do this for you. This is a need. We can take a look at our policies and procedures. We need to expand on these. And so that really worked in that situation. So I just kind of found the need and thought, I think I'm going to really enjoy this part.
That is wonderful to hear, because so many people talk about particular responsibilities within the roles of valuation and appraisal. Some people like doing all of them. Some people only like doing a portion of them. And some people actually have an interest and they don't even realize that the industry is so large that there are actually companies and positions that could really be a great fit if they only knew about it. So that's why we always appreciate hearing the different experiences, perspectives, and musings, because it opens up possibilities for others along the way. So would you say that, do you miss being out in the field, or have you really just been more like a duck in water as you get into like risk and policy and compliance?
Well, I do miss parts of the field. I don't miss the, driving around. The driving around gets really, in my experience, just really hard on the body, especially when you're in rural and remote areas, because you're in the car probably more than half the day at that point. And so it's just, sitting and sitting and sitting and sitting is not good. So I don't miss that part of it. And I would say, I'm like a duck takes to water with my current role. I like that risk mindset. I like solving problems for clients. I love when they come to us and they say, hey, we need some such and such. And then we have a conversation and we really scope it out and we really figure out what is it you actually need. They might have an idea to begin with, but then it morphs and we change it and we say, no, actually, to really accomplish what you're trying to do, we need to do X, Y, and Z. You need the process for this. You need a procedure for this. You need, this particular tool or whatever the case is that we're looking at. We kind of customize it for. And so yes, I miss the field, but, I'm still doing review work. I'm still looking at a lot of appraisal work in some of the services that we do. So I have not moved away from it, just in a different way. And your point of all sorts of opportunities that may not be a consulting firm where just like us, we're contracting to all these different clients, but it could be you're fitting into one company and you're doing something that is related to appraisal, but it's just not doing appraisals every day. And there are all sorts of opportunities out there. And so exploring those, again, making that phone call, asking someone, reaching out. First of all, the answer could be no, but the answer is automatically no if you don't ask. And you might learn of other opportunities anyway, right? And then it might be even something
that's helpful to know. What was it for you that ultimately had you leave a larger company and go out and start your own appraisal firm and then ultimately your consultation practice?
Well, I got to looking at what I was doing and I realized, I could do this and more for various types of clients. And I had a sort of vision, I guess you could say, of, a small team, at least, and I had, me and one other person to begin with, within months of venturing into that. But really it was, how can I use maybe my whole skill set rather than what was a bit of a limited skill set there, because I was working for one particular company, which was one particular type of company. They did one particular type of thing. And so, I started thinking larger and saying, well, we could do this type of service for this company, this type of service for this type of company, and so on. So I just saw those opportunities there. And, it was a scary move, just like any change. I questioned my own sanity at the beginning. But, it worked out. We've carved out a niche. We're carving out bigger niches as we go to be able to do more for more types of clients. So it was really just looking at, what is my self, what is my worth? What do I offer? And I thought, gosh, I could offer a bit more, especially if I have, another person helping me or another two.
And when you talk about, kind of dealing with that initial risk and looking to see how can you do more, what is it that has really guided you on your growth? Was it just like, hey, someone asked, so I said yes? Or was it a strong sense of, these are the 2 or 3 areas that I really enjoy most, and I want to just focus here?
Probably a little of both of those. It was looking at a sort of prescribed set of services that I thought, okay, I can offer this, this, and this type of thing. But like with any company, I had people coming to me saying, well, could you do this? And I thought, gosh, I didn't imagine I would be doing that, but yeah, I most certainly could. I mean, some of the items around the technology and the changes in technology, I've had a number of clients related to technology, and still have a few that we're still continuing with some projects on. It's sort of ongoing. And the sort of mindset of keeping that open mind, saying, yeah, let's talk about this more. Let me make sure I understand what you're asking me to do. And then I can answer you and tell you whether or not I have that skill set for it, or whether I know somebody. We work with some contractors who have some very specialized skills, and they help us fill some of our projects in some cases. So probably a little of both. I mean, I still do love our sort of core set of services, but we do all sorts of variety.
No, I definitely appreciate that. It's such an illuminating point that a lot of people who have shared, they're like, look, I got into appraisal, been in appraisal a long time. I kind of just do the same thing over and over. I like it, but maybe I want to consider something different, not realizing that there are so many opportunities. And I think that's what's unique about the path you've taken, and many others have not right or not wrong, just different. And that's really not only guided you, but also opened up roles and responsibilities that wouldn't have existed if you were still being a staff appraiser for a firm.
Right. And I think, even just listening to the client is a skill that I've had to really fine tune, because sometimes I get into a conversation and I think I know what they're telling me. And then it turns out I don't. It turns out I should have had a conversation that was 3 minutes longer, and we had talked a little bit more. But, I've learned that, and it's a skill talking with clients. But I think even just in the appraisal profession, we find that right now is, sometimes it's, we don't, as an entire profession, play the role of listening to, what are all our clients asking for? We maybe work for just one type of client. And that's what I found was really true with me, is I was working for one type of client, and it was mortgage. And at a certain point I had to say, do I want to do other types of work? And if so, I need to talk with clients. I need to hear them. I need to listen to them. And that helps open up other work, other types of opportunities too. So that listening is really important. I mean, that goes beyond business. I mean, you just have to listen in life. Usually I find that, of course, I'm doing a lot of talking right now because of the nature of what we're doing. But usually I try to keep my mouth shut, actually, because I find that I am much more valuable if I listen and then come to a reasonable conclusion out of it, rather than just being this constant part of the conversation. I'm much better sitting back. And I think that's just a skill I've had to learn.
That's an impressive skill that many of us could definitely do better. I mean, I only need to go so far as to step into the next room and ask my spouse, and she'd tell me the same thing. She goes, you could be a better listener. I'm like, really? I didn't know it got better than this. She goes, oh, hey, when you're starting at the bottom, there's a long set of stair steps up. I was like, oh, thank you, honey. I love you too.
My tip that I've had to train myself on is, when I feel like opening my mouth, wait a few seconds, because usually the person will tell you more, or someone else will have the opportunity to talk, and then you learn about them. And, I think about everything we miss because we're stepping on someone else talking.
Yes. That in and of itself should be a CE course. I mean, I always marvel at how narrowly focused. I was going to say narrow-minded, but I don't wish to disparage some people that mean well, and sometimes I do actually. But this case, just narrowly focused. So much of the CE in the profession is, and I'm like, it's really not serving the profession well. Like, there's so much more that goes into this that really could be part of the body of knowledge and professional services, but. My opinion wasn't asked for, so I just put it out in the ethos. That's how it goes. Like I said, there was going to be comments on this episode. I just never know which ones are going to show up, so it gets pretty fascinating along the way. Well, I mean, one of the things people always love to hear about, Josh, is given all that you've been exposed to from from starting out in banking to getting into small town and city appraising, being over there near the Rockies, and now with the type of work you do to a national client base. What are you looking forward to? What are you optimistic about over the next 3 to 5 years?
I think I'm optimistic about both people and technology. I think I'm optimistic about technology. You know, what I often, and I usually say it as a lighthearted moment in different classes I'm teaching, but it often comes up, whether it's USPAP class, whether it's, I have a really fun work file class. I know that might sound
May I just
weird,
say that does sound weird, but given your personality, I have to take it at full value that it's got to be better than most of the CE classes I've taken in decades. That sounds good.
It does. It works. But, I always kind of, at some point it comes around to, okay, humans have gotten to the moon and back again alive.
Yes.
If that can happen, we can most certainly have technology that helps appraisers be better analysts. I know we don't use accuracy as our objective. We use credible, but we can have better precision, right? And with using technology. So I'm really optimistic about the technology piece and seeing how we have technology plus people. And it's like a 1 + 1 = 3. It's taking the two pieces and getting further than we could with either AVM technology on its own, or whether with the appraiser doing things manually on his or her own. If you put it together, you can get that greater distance. And then I think just from a person perspective, I think I'm optimistic about the change in our profession in terms of getting people into the profession now. When I first started teaching, you would never see a trainee.
That's true.
For the most part. It was just no one talked about trainees. It was so much of a downer. I'm not going to train my competition, and it's so hard. And I think we're coming to a point where people are harnessing that opportunity and coming up with models that do work, where we can have trainees. And so I'm excited about just new people coming in, because anytime you bring in new people to anything, you get a revival, you get new and better ways to learn, you get new and better things to learn. So whether it's methods or technology within that learning, I've helped with a real estate program at our local university, and I'm not I don't consider myself old, but I'm obviously older than the people most people anyway, going to the college. And when I go into a class there, I'm always so amazed and so excited at, how smart young people are. And I know we always hear about all the downers and, oh my gosh, this next generation, they're dumb and they don't know anything. And that's not true. That's not true on the whole. And so I'm really excited for some of these people to be coming into our profession, because as a profession, we can advance just by the people who are coming in. So that technology and people.
And as someone who's moved more into the broader pace of contributing to the industry and the work that you do with the national client base, as well as your own courses in education, what would you say to those people who could, not necessarily do, but could have a perspective that either there's no new knowledge or there's no good courses out there? CE is a mandatory evil that they must complete every 2 years.
Well, I think education is what you make of it. Learning is what you make of it. Life is what you make of it. I think that you can choose classes based on the number of credits. If that's the way you want to go, you want to say, oh my gosh, I have 3 months left and I need to take this many number of credit hours, and you just choose some random classes. Hey, great. You did it. You kept your certification, or you kept your license. I wouldn't agree with that approach, though. I think you need to look for, what do you need to learn about and what do you want to learn about? Not what is the right number. If you go over by 2 credit hours, there's no penalty for taking more education.
Taking more education
so
than you need?
There is no penalty. You don't lose your license. You don't get a bonus, though. I don't think you can carry them over. but you can be the person that sits on the Zoom class and just veggies out and gets through the 7 hours or the 3 hours or whatever it is. You can be the person in the back of the room that veggies out and, checks your email or whatever as when, the instructor's not looking or something. Or you can choose to be the person who makes what they want out of the education. So I think if you intentionally look for class topics, if you intentionally look for instructors who have good reputations for keeping it exciting, keeping it very participatory, where you play a role, where they're actually calling on you, they're not making you feel stupid, they're bringing everyone together to learn, I think you can make it work really, really well. There's some awesome education out there. I teach for a number of providers. I also create my own classes. I would encourage anyone out there, develop your own 1 hour class for realtors and locally. And then maybe you go, you get on a Zoom call with, someone who has a little larger reach in their group. Anyway, I guess that's a little bit of a tangent, but there's a need for a lot of good instructors out there. First, you have there's two parts, right? You need good material. Good material can be supplemented, or we'll just say material can be supplemented and really made excellent by a good instructor as well, because you can bring in the other web pages and resources, and you can bring in the targeted, good, on-topic discussion that really makes people learn, right? No one learns off of a slide. So.
Josh, I am so grateful for this informative hour we have spent together. It literally flew by faster than leaves in the wind, leaving fall, headed towards spring, although I haven't seen many little buds on the trees in this part of the country. But nonetheless, I think you guys just got a bunch of snow here this past weekend, didn't you?
We did. Yeah, up in the mountains, it was wild. We got a little rain the other day. But by the way, we do have buds. Actually, I was just coming in yesterday. And
that is good. Speaking of buds, congratulations on Stacy joining you all. That's always great to see the power of perusings, connecting wonderful people and directly or indirectly. So we're excited about that also.
Yes,
so big shout out for you guys at Wallet Solutions.
Thank you.
You were very welcome. This podcast continues to grow. Its impact, its influence, and its inspiration because of you, the listener, sharing what you got out of this, both by commenting on the platform for which you're listening, but also by not only liking the podcast, whether it's on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or these days even on YouTube, because others get to learn and grow along the way. As we heard Josh really talk about that importance of being a lifelong learner and, being a problem solver. So with that, Josh, thanks so much for joining us today, and we're going to be bringing this episode to a close.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Perusing's Appraisers on Purpose. We hope you enjoyed learning from the amazing professional paths and achievements of our beloved guests. Before we go, please subscribe on your listening channel, Spotify, LinkedIn, YouTube, and other podcast channels to hear more from appraisers and valuers regarding their life and their work. After you drop a comment below, who is one friend and peer you can generously share this episode with? If you have any suggestions or questions for future episodes, we'd love to hear from you. Just send us a message on LinkedIn and we'll be sure to get back to you. Thanks again for listening, and until we're together again for the next session of Perusing's Appraisers on Purpose, create the change that you seek.